Let's build a Kratos. Hello, I'm Marcel.
And I'm Mrs. Snakeworks. Here is a box for the Kratos. What do you think of it, Parker?
This son of a bitch is huge. I mean, it's like a man, it's big.
The Fellblade's son.
Who's Parker?
Inside the box is a tray, which slides out. There are loads of sprues in the tray as well as the decals. What we were actually looking for is the instructions. It's always best to have a scan through the instructions just to get an idea of the process that we shall be attempting. So the first parts we need are those big track sides on the sprue here. To remove them from the sprue, we used our Tamiya clippers. They're starting to wear a bit now and probably need replacing soon. Please remind me to replace them in the comments below. Can you recommend a decent brand to go with next? Are those God Hand ones any good I keep hearing about?
Long-time viewers will recognise Andy the knife. He needs a new sharp blade. Some say Andy is too big for modelling, but we find he works fine. To change the blade, we have to pull Andy apart. There's only one screw holding it together. These blades are double-ended, so all we had to do was turn it around. Upon doing this, we noticed that we have this lovely Carbide logo on the blade. I'd never noticed that before. Don't you get Carbide tips on drills or something?
Have you heard of Carbide?
Nope, no idea what that means.
What even is Carbide? Does anyone actually know? Something to do with carbon, I imagine. With the new blade in, we can bolt him back together. So, using Andy the knife, we then clean up any of the sprue attachment points. Sometimes we cut bits off, and sometimes we shave bits off, depending on what needs cleaning up. To tidy up further, we then use a file. Sometimes you don't need to bother, but it does help, especially with trying to get nice flat surfaces. Little hobby files are great for this. Feel free to file that information away. I'll get my coat. We now have our two large panels all cleaned up and we need to glue them together. As they are so big, we've come up with a plan. A cunning plan, as Baldric would say.
Don't worry, Mr. B. I have a cunning plan to solve the problem. Yes, Baldric, let us not forget that you tried to solve the problem of your mother's low ceiling by cutting off her head.
I do miss Blackadder. Did any of you guys ever used to watch it?
We need some glue. As it's a plastic kit, we'll be using polystyrene cement today. We have some thin stuff and some normal goopy stuff. Both have their uses. Using a bit of the thick stuff, we touch a tiny amount to each of the male parts of the track sides. You only need a small amount as it will squeeze out and make a mess if you add too much. We then push the two sides together and quickly put some elastic bands on to hold it tight. I think that's a song by Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick and Titch. I have no idea who the fuck they are. Did you make those people up?
No, they're real. Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick and Titch.
Look, if they're not from Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Take That, Westlife, I'm not going to know them.
Now that song, Hold Tight, was also used in the movie Death Proof by Quentin Tarantino. I only ever saw it once many years ago. Nice soundtrack though. I'm not going to show you a clip of that scene because it is quite violent. Feel free to search it up if you are interested. With the elastic bands already holding the two halves together, we wick in some of the thin cement along the seam. We want this thing stuck together as tight as possible with no gaps, but also clean and tidy. Next up, we need this part, a track with another half a track on it. It looks a bit like a door hinge. That little track piece butts up against the inside of the track mount. It isn't covered up by anything yet, but I assume it will be later. Otherwise, it might look quite strange. Now I'm not sure what this is doing in here. Somehow I've managed to take a screenshot of myself. Please ignore this. Next up, it's some more tracks. I think there's quite a few of these coming up for the next steps of the build. This one is a double track. Luckily, they are all numbered clearly on the instructions and it's hard to get confused. That track butts up against our previous track, giving us this. There are little pins and posts that help locate the tracks, so don't worry too much about gaps or anything. It does pay to dry fit some of these parts just in case. Some of you keen-eyed viewers out there might have noticed the holes in my jumper. Mrs. Snakeworks and I have no idea how these got in there, but they're all over it. I postulated they might be from moths eating it. Is this what mothballs are for? I thought they were for putting in your beef stew.
Homer was yellow, Mom was too, because I put mothballs in the beef stew.
Now, word on the street was always that Michael Jackson helped co-create that Bartman song. I don't know how true that is though. If any of you are from a music background, you might well know though.
Next up, it's a pair of single track pieces. These pieces go around the track wheel. I think they have a proper name, but I don't know what it is. Now here's something we sometimes like to do with fiddly builds with a lot of similar steps. Every time we complete a step, we then tick it off the instruction sheet.
You might find it overkill, as they call it. But I've missed out a lot of steps in various kits over the years, and this helps to prevent it. Well, should do. Our next piece is a nice big chunky track part. There's 5 links in this one. It actually looks like my old Accurist watch strap. Our Accurist's still going. With that large piece on, we have finished the rear end of the track side. We still have the bottom and the front to do. There are a lot of pieces. Luckily, our next piece is a real big one. I'm not going to count the links in this, but it's at least 10. Feel free to count them yourself and let us know what you find in the comments below. Now, we are a big fan of your comments here over at Snakeworks, and we do our best to reply to every single one of them.
As that track link piece was large and floppy, we felt it would be a good idea to weigh it down while it dried. We used our glue pot to do this. It worked pretty well. For the front curve of the tracks, we have 3 more individual links and a triple. These are fun to assemble. With these 4 parts added, the tracks are getting closer to completion. I think we only have to put the top sections on now.
Now, every time we added one of those track links, we made sure it was lined up and sitting snugly where it should be, along with the other links. There's a small amount of wiggle room, and we tried to take advantage of that. It's a big one and a small one up next. These are our last track links to add. Well done if you've managed to watch the whole track assembly so far. With those last track links added, we have this. Some sort of caterpillar tracked shoe looking thing. Isn't there some sort of off-road ski that exists that looks a little bit like that? I'm sure I saw a man on them once many years ago when I was on a school trip to Amsterdam. There was a man on skis with like caterpillar tracks on the bottom. Interesting, but I've no idea what they're called. You will be pleased to see we have some panels next that are not track links. This time we have some hull sides and track covers, along with a turret mount, I think. With all those parts attached, we have this. The front track covers have a join which can easily end up with gaps if you're not careful, so I recommend paying extra attention here so you don't end up with an untidy slit. Again, we wicked in some thin cement and then squeezed it together to close any unsightly seams. It seems too good to be true. I'll get my coat.
Alright then, so with that track side done, we now have to build the exact same thing but mirrored for the other side. We are going to do that off camera so you don't have to watch it all again. We're nice like that. Here are both of the track sides built. I think they are looking quite cool. They remind me of something but I can't quite put my finger on it. Okay, so next up we are building the front plate. I think in Universe they call it the glacis?
Glacis or glacis.
Glacis? Or is that just the little pane of glass in the vision slit? We have a few little bits here to assemble, each with their own slit in. I don't think I've ever seen 3 slits at once before. With all those vision slitty bits assembled, we have this, the front panel. I assume those vertical letterbox things are where the RAM attaches?
So if you wanted to skip ahead a little bit, it would turn out they're not. But you'll see for yourself later on. Our next two parts are the hull bottom plate and the front plate with the weird radiator grille thing on. Does anyone know what this thing is? As these large parts only contact along one edge, we left them to dry horizontally on its side, so there was no pressure on the join, else it might have sagged when we were working on the next parts. We have an interesting rectangular panel up next, with some moulded in biro pen lids by the look of things. 10 internet cookies if you can guess where this goes. Well, it attaches to that previous subassembly. Yet again, to prevent sagging, we left the entire assembly resting on its side. If you look closely, you'll see a few little gaps. We can sort those out later. Now, to sort those out, I usually again just wick in a little cement and give the parts a good squeeze. If that doesn't work, then we're going to have to break out the old gap filler.
Up next are another couple of rectangular panels. One looks to be the engine grille. I am never sure if it's an intake or exhaust. I assume intake as there are separate exhausts. Here's those two panels fitted together. I won't lie, but it took us a few tries to figure out the correct orientation and fit for them. When we got it right, they did fit really well, to be fair. And again, we add it to our big length from before. We have to let this dry on its side for a while. We normally prep the next few parts while waiting for it to dry. Luckily, it doesn't take too long.
Now, I strongly advise giving the hull assembly plenty of time to dry. Go and make a cup of tea or something. Have a break. Have a Kit Kat. A Kit Kat's still a thing. With the tracks and part of the hull assembled, we now have something that reminds me of the Bat missile scene from Batman Returns. Okay, so in my excitement of playing with my Batman Kratos, I ended up missing a part out. So much for my checklist, eh? We were supposed to attach this panel to another panel which we haven't yet attached. Here is the panel we were supposed to attach before we stuck the sides on. Let's hope we can fiddle it in there without causing some serious damage. Okay, so we've managed to slide it in dry and wiggle it into position. It's not yet glued as we wanted to make sure it fit before getting plastic melting glue everywhere. After wicking in some thin plastic glue to the seams, we then added a shed load of elastic bands to make sure it was stuck securely in place. Now this time, while the glue dried, or set up as Andy from Andy's Hobby Headquarters would say, I made myself some lunch. I've no idea what I had as it was a few days ago, but I would assume it was a sandwich or something. It certainly wasn't a roast dinner. I fancy a roast dinner now, you know. Haven't had one in a while.
So remember that piece from earlier we couldn't stick on? Well, we've stuck it on now. It has some lenses on it. Okay, so moving away from the mistakes now, hopefully. We have 8 halves of the exhausts. Some have what look like pistol grips, while the other half do not. These were a very simple assembly. We made sure we put a fair bit of glue in the seam where the actual exhaust cowlings meet so we don't get any gaps. Gaps here look really, really wrong. Those 4 exhausts simply plug into little slots on the back of the tank. For now, we are going to leave them off for ease of painting later.
Now the main reason we're leaving them off is we haven't actually yet decided on a paint scheme. If you have any suggestions, then let us know in the comments below. Next up, we have 4 interesting looking panels, a couple of long ones and a pair of triangles. Be careful when cleaning up the triangles as this plastic is quite thin and it's easy to ruin the shape of them. I've also just noticed these longer panels look a bit like Optimus Prime's legs. Hopefully he won't notice we've stolen them. Give me my legs back. I need them to defeat the Decepticons. Sorry Optimus, you can have your legs back just as soon as we've finished with them.
Optimus Prime's legs attach nicely to the rear half of the Kratos. They form a nice slab side that's at a 45-degree angle to the rest of the track sides. Next, we had to pick our weapons for the shoulder turret things. We went with Volkite, as we felt it would be fun to paint the Voltee.
Volkite.
They're both the same.
Yeah.
Okay, we went with Volkite, as we felt it would be fun to paint the Volkite heat effects later. The Volkites come in two parts, a shaft and a tip. There's two of these. With the Volkites assembled, they are already finished. We'll put these to the side for now.
Now it might be possible to magnetise these weapons to swap in and out later, but for now we're sticking with the Volkite. Or is it Volkites? Our next parts are these interesting looking nubs. We have two male parts and two female. After gluing these parts together, we have a pair of little weapon mounts, but these are not the whole assembly. The Volkites, or any other weapon you might have chosen, plug into these ports, but to me the fit isn't quite tight enough for a push fit, so I think we're going to be using glue, or perhaps magnets later on. Do you push fit your shoulder mounted sponson weapons, or do you glue yours in? Or maybe you like to magnetise them? Let us know how you guys did yours.
The next part for our shoulder sponsons are these half-barrel looking parts. Again, we have two male and two female pieces. These assemble around the socket parts from the previous steps. You don't glue the weapon mounts in, so it allows them to pivot up and down. It's not the tightest fit, but I'm sure there are ways to tighten these things up.
If you have any suggestions on how to tighten up loose joints, then please let us all know in the comments below. I used to sometimes put a little bit of super glue on the joint, and sometimes when it was dry, it would then make that joint a bit tighter. Bung a bit of super glue in there and whoop, stiff. The two shoulder sponsons fit in little alcoves either side of where the turret will sit. Amusingly, with these turrets on, it now reminds me of the battle tank from Terrahawks.
Go on, you lovely Megazords! Give it to 'em, lads!
I used to absolutely love Terrahawks as a kid, and I'm sure the Battlehawk from that show is what the Space Marine Thunderhawk is based on. It even has the same look and shape to it. But that's a video for another day.
Okay, so here we have maybe the biggest panel out of the box, the turret ring. What I like is Tony can see the way the plastic has swirled and melted together. Tony?
I don't even know who Tony is.
Then why would you type him into the script?
Just change Tony for you.
You, as in I say what I like is you can see or I can see.
We.
What I like is we can see the way the plastic has swirled and melted together, like a marbling effect. I'm not sure why I find it interesting, but it is.
Who is Tony? He's the guy from the car wash.
Oh yeah. As the panel was large, flat, and had a lot of attachment points, I put a weight on the top to hold it down. In this case, I used my nearly full pea glue bottle.
BB-8.
Obviously, you can use anything you like. Our next parts are these little hatches. I don't think they are different. They looked exactly the same to me. These hatches attach to the hatch holes from a few steps back. I like the way the hinges are at a 45-degree angle. I think they look cool.
At what point in time does a hatch become a cupola or cupola? How do you even pronounce that word? What is the difference between them? Okay, so we're now at the stage when we need to decide on which main turret weapon we want. It's possible to magnetise and swap freely, but I fancy just sticking with the one. We decided to go with Volkite as again it should be fun to paint. The first parts of our turret consist of the main base ring and this little side piece. The look of the join reminds me of the clockwork mouse things from the Ninja Turtles cartoon in the 80s. Or was it the 90s? The other side of the turret also has a similar part which again has the robot mouse mouth look to it. This piece also houses the main weapon barrel, I believe. With those two sides on, the turret is really starting to look the part. I'm looking forward to seeing this thing built now. There's always a part in every model when you're building it and you go, "Ooh, that looks really good now." With tanks, it's normally when you stick the turret on.
Our next parts are these two thinner parts. They have some nice curved detail on them. It's nice seeing the contrast of angular marine armour with curved and circular parts. I think it looks good. With those two parts on, we are beginning to build the box part for the rear of the turret. With our next two parts, we have to be careful. Not only is the first part really small and easy to lose to the void of the carpet, but the other part has little tabs that look a bit like sprue attachment points, so be mindful you don't cut them off. The big piece attaches to the rear of the turret, while the little piece is a little lens or sensor on the front of the turret. The little details like this really do look nice.
Now, speaking of lenses, I still haven't figured out a way that I like to paint them the most. Sometimes I like a reflective glossy finish, you know, like a binocular lens on the end there, and sometimes I like a glowing lens with glowing light. You know what I mean. When it comes to this miniature, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Next up, we have the parts to build the turret-mounted coaxial autocannon. It all comes as one piece, apart from half of the barrel tip. Again, this piece is really small, so be careful you don't lose it. That autocannon fits inside the turret, where there's a little cutout for it. Again, you're not supposed to glue it, but I think I might. I really like the look of the cooling fin things on it. Are they on all autocannons? Get your magnifying glass ready because we have yet another tiny piece, along with the turret ring and the top of the turret. You can see here just how small that part is next to our biro. This is the results of that little sub-assembly, the turret cap, if you will. This cap also has the commander's cupola or cupola in it. I've still not decided if I want a commander visible or not. I would like to know if you guys like to build your tanks with the hatch crew in them or not. Do you think tanks look good with them in, or do you think tanks look bad with them in? Let us all know in the comments below.
As we decided on the Volkite Canderel as our main weapon, we need our two halves of said weapon. I'm sure Canderel is a type of sugar. Oh, I think you're right. Canderel? I've forgotten what its real name is. As it's a long seam, we use the elastic bands again. We've wrapped them a few times to make them really tight. Also, I think some people might call them rubber bands. We also have some fun details to stick on the Volkite, some more ribbed shaft sections, and some cables that look like they came out of my dad's old computer. Do they call these ribbon cables or something? All these pieces form together to make Voltron! Nah, only kidding. Just the Volkite Canderel. Again, it will move up and down inside the turret mount. And again, I think we will just glue it in place. How many more times can I say again? We also put the turret top plate on here. We also put the turret top plate on here, and this locks those weapons in. So if you do want to magnetize, I think this piece needs to be able to come off too. That's a lot of fiddly work.
Another question for you. Do you guys like to magnetize your weapons or glue them in place? Do you like to have that option of the movement? Or do you see it as a game piece, therefore it doesn't even need to move? It's not a toy. Again, to get a neat join, we are using elastic bands to hold the top plate down while it dries. While the top plate is drying, we can begin work on our next pieces. In this case, a couple of odd curved shaped parts. These two parts are the sides of this weird mechanical doohickey. There are three little nubs that could easily get gaps in, so I made sure the glue filled them in nicely. There are absolutely loads of different ways to fill gaps in models, but I think that deserves a whole video in itself. Would you like to see one?
Next up are four small parts. A barrel cover, a tiny little pipe that's very easily losable, and what looks like a plug socket, and half a panel of some kind. Be careful with that pipe, it's really, really small. If that gets on the floor, it's gone. All those parts fit onto the turret, completing the build of that section. As before, if you wanted the guns to be removable, you would have to make that barrel cover thing removable too. That's a lot of parts to leave off.
Now I say the turret's complete, but we will be returning to it later on, for reasons you will understand when we get there. Our next parts are these things that look a bit like toilet seats. On the left are the male parts, and the right, the females. You need keen eyesight here to see the little nubs and holes. Also, please ignore that hair on the left. I'm not sure whose that is. Oh, there's two of them. Assembling those halves gives us a pair of sponson mounts. You just have to make sure you get the male and female parts lined up, or else again you might get weird gaps. Next up are these rounded panels with little rivets on. These are the sponson shields. They fit snugly on your fingers. The shields don't appear to be sided, so you can go ahead and glue them on the sponson mounts. Make sure they point the right way though. The winged tips should point the same direction as the sponson mount itself. Now, I don't think it would be a huge deal if you messed those up. There is only one contact point, so if you were quick, you could probably pull them off, get it right, and then glue them back together again.
Again, going with our Volkite theme, we collect the parts needed for the Volkite sponsons, 2 main weapon bodies and the side panels for each. There's also the end caps for the barrels in that awesome letterbox style, and of course, more printer ribbons. Marcel just googled printer ribbons and they are nothing like these. Turns out what we are thinking of are ribbon cables. When we assemble all those parts, we end up with these. Volkite weapons have some lovely signature details to them and they do look great. In my humble opinion, of course.
Do you want to see one?
No.
So today's big question is, what do you think is the best looking weapon in all of the Warhammer 40,000 universe? Do you like las weapons? Do you like plasma weapons? Do you prefer Volkites perhaps? I was always a fan of las cannons when I was younger, and I'm starting to enjoy plasma weapons more nowadays. Oh, that light just died. There's still a few more parts needed to finish the sponsons, and you can see them here, where I'm giving them a tickle with my biro. Biro tickling used to be big in the 80s, and I feel we should bring it back. Anyway, these parts are what look like Rob the robot heads and little circles on spikes. The robot heads and circles were the pivots for mounting the Volkites into the sponsons. You don't glue the guns in, only the mounts to each other. It's hard to explain, but if you make your own, you'll understand. Basically, they're attached, but still able to move. The sponsons have these interesting little twist mount methods, which allows swapping them out easily. Again, I might even glue ours in place, but we haven't really decided this yet. What do you think? Now, do they sell that sponson sprue separately? I think it would be a good idea if they did, because it would allow you to swap your weapons in and out easily, without having to resort to magnets and the like. And also not having to buy a whole another kit just to get some more sponsons.
Aha, so it's accessories time next. I always struggle with spelling accessories. I can see that. How many double letters does it have? Can anyone spell it without spell check? I doubt it. Anyway, we have some tubes, a Coke can holder, half a catapult, and some lights. After sticking those together, we have these. A missile launcher of the hunter-killer variety, I believe. A pair of Coke can launchers, also known as smoke launchers, and a searchlight. Marcel shaved the grill off the front of ours as he thinks it looks better.
Now, I have to admit I didn't come up with that idea. It was in fact something I saw Richard Gray do. And speaking of Richard Gray, this week we have been mostly watching Richard Gray, and in one of his videos I saw he removed the grill from a searchlight, and in my opinion it looked loads better. So we decided to try it for ourselves.
But my light has had all that shaved off, so it's just like a smooth lens, and that would be way easier for me to paint, and I think it'll look nicer as well.
Okay, so remember we talked about the Commander's Cuplola or hatch? Well, here are the parts required to make it. Lots of fiddly bits. Body bits, arms, heads, and the things he's supposed to be holding. Sometimes parts are fiddly and are a pain to hold together when you glue them. When that happens, I like to put them onto my blue tack mound. This holds them in place while they dry. It's very handy. It's similar to one of those things with the alligator clips on the gooseneck arms. I have no idea what you call them. Games Workshop does sell them though. I think they're just called like a hobby holder or something. Project holder maybe? Now if you want to get your hands on your own Kratos kit, then I've put a little link in the description below for you, or up here somewhere. Check out these wonderful pieces. These are for the big cheese wedge ram on the front of the Kratos. We cleaned them up and arranged them in order of assembly. I think they call that being organised. Now those pieces literally just stick to each other. It's easy to put together, you just have to check the orientation of some parts. It's quite a hefty ram, isn't it? We still haven't decided if we want to use it or not though, and we'll get to that later. The next parts we need are these little plastic golf clubs. We spent a few minutes kicking around the Space Marine's head as it just felt so much fun, you know? Gluing the golf club parts together made us a pair of mounting struts for the big Dozer blade or ram. You can't get these wrong as they're sided. All we have to do then is glue those mounting struts onto the ram and the Dozer blade is complete. A deadly and fantastic looking device. So I want to know, is it a Dozer blade or is it a ram? What do the instructions say? Let's have a look. It's a Dozer blade. Now while we've got this instruction manual out, I thought it would be amusing to share with you this funny paragraph on the front page. Just under the "Do not glue the components" logo, it says, "If you're enjoying this video, then please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel." That means you, Stephen. And remember, Mrs. Snakeworks has said that when we hit 10,000 subscribers, we're allowed to order a Warhound Titan. So please smash that subscribe button and we can hit that target ASAP. If you are enjoying the content on the channel, then please consider joining us on Patreon. The link is in the description below or up here somewhere. You could even become a channel member, which these days is becoming all the rage. Again, you can do that with the links in the description below. But that's enough e-begging. Let's continue on.
We cut now to the commander that we built. We did make a couple of changes though. Firstly, we swapped the Mark II head out for a much cooler looking Mark VI. We also put a top knot on it to make him look even cooler. And then to add even more coolness, if that's even possible, we twisted his body angle slightly to give him more of a relaxed lean rather than the sitting straight forward look. That looks a bit awkward and unnatural to me. I now think he looks as good as my husband. He is really cool. Okay, next up are a pair of really little tow hooks. The instructions say you can add either of these or the Dozer blade. I see no reason why you can't have both. Again, be careful you don't lose these when removing from the sprue, as they are tiny. We can see here where we stuck the tow hooks to the front of the Kratos. We checked the Dozer blade would still fit and did have to move them up the front panel a little bit for clearance. It wasn't hard at all. Now while we put our paints away, I just want to give a huge loving shout out to all our patrons and channel members. Dan Gallop, Lee Blackley, Donald, Pine Tree, Bobzilla, Charles Marlowe, Andrew Marrington, Nick Ellingham, Briars and Bantams, Timbo, and our newest member, Sven V. We really appreciate all your support. If you want me to shout you out on the roll call, then you can use any of the links below to sign up.
Okay, so the main assembly of the tank is now complete, but we now have to deal with what I like to call options. We haven't yet committed to any of these options and we really need your help with them. Are you ready? Let's go. Okay, so option 1. Do we attach the Dozer blade or not? Does it look better with or without it? We just can't decide.
Next up is where to mount the searchlight. The first possibility is here on the front, but it may look wrong in front of those vision slits.
We could move it to one side. Does it look good here or did it look better in the middle?
There's also the option of the other side. I think this is the best placement of the front mounting points.
We could also maybe mount it on the main Volkite weapon. I think it looks okay, but maybe makes the turret look a little too busy perhaps?
There's the option of moving it over on top of the autocannon mount. Which placement do you think works best? Please let us know in the comments below.
Next up are the smoke launchers. Do we attach these or not? They usually attach to the side armour as shown here, but again, I think maybe they make the tank look a little busy. I think we probably will use these though, as they kind of make sense.
Our next option is the Hunter Killer missile. Where could we stick this? Option 1 is here on the shoulder behind the turret. I think it looks good, but will look wrong with the smoke launchers in front of it. Maybe.
Another option is to attach it to the side of the turret here next to the commander's hatch. I think it looks okay, but again, maybe a little too busy.
You could also attach it to the other side of the turret at a slight angle, which I think looks quite interesting. What do you guys think?
Similar to that last option is moving it forward slightly to the side of the main Volkite weapon. Not a huge amount of difference, but does look maybe a little more tidy.
Last but not least is the option of mounting it on top of the main gun. This one looks okay to me, but still not quite right, you know?
Now please let us know which of those mounting points and other options you think are the best. You can even come along and discuss it on our friendly Discord server, which is not behind a paywall. There's a link in the description below and up here somewhere. We look forward to chatting to you there. Alright, let's check out the finished article, shall we? So here it is, the finished Kratos tank. I think this thing looks bloody lovely. It's a wonderful design, and that main Volkite gun looks really good.
We still have a few options to consider, such as the Dozer blade, lights, and extra weapon, so please let us know what you think we should do with those.
This kit was really good fun to put together, and also it was really easy to do, which is always nice. The only problem is going to be deciding on which legion to paint it as.
We do have a few schemes in mind, but won't decide until the last minute, as is per usual with these things.
Which legion would you go with? If you want to see some more videos in this Horus Heresy series, then check out the playlist up here somewhere. And as always, thank you very much for watching.